This particular podcast will look at how to introduce the sport of tennis, in particular the indoor version or mini version, in high school physical education classes. It does contain many of the components of traditional outdoor tennis, if that sport is available, but it shows modifications on how you can teach tennis in an indoor setting as well as specialized equipment. So we'll first look at the indoor game rules and guidelines in comparison to the traditional outdoor game. We'll take a look through the basic strokes and modified game forms. So for the indoor game of tennis, for this indoor game you use a shorter shafted racket than traditional outdoor play. It's really a hybrid between a tennis racket and a racquetball racket, kind of a mid-racket in between as far as shaft length. You use foam indoor bounce tennis balls to play versus a traditional tennis ball, and then you use the standard sized badminton court to play upon. The easiest way to define boundaries in it is that you use the doubles boundaries for the sideline and the single boundaries for the baseline of the badminton court. In other words, the court is wide, maximum long. Service takes place with both feet behind the baseline, so you cannot cross the very baseline when you serve. Serve is diagonal cross court behind the short line to be in bounds. Players may contact the ball anywhere in the playing area, so the no volley zone does not apply like in pickleball. And however, you cannot reach over the net with any part of the racket or the body to contact the ball. Rules are too, as in traditional tennis, you must let the ball bounce on the ground before returning the initial serve, and then the scoring and game guidelines follow traditional tennis rules. So on the left shows kind of the basic equipment. You may use the portable nets as shown here in this picture as far as the standard set. You may use the portable nets for tennis, or if you have traditional pickleball courts, you just use the courts in the pickleball setting to teach this sport. Notice here also are the foam tennis balls. They look like a traditional tennis ball, however they're slightly larger in size and they move slower, and you see the shorter shafted rackets that look similar to a racquetball racket for traditional play. So let's look at some of the general components that for tennis. So this resource packet will kind of review this. This is information that you will need to read over and look at. It provides a lot of great guidelines as to how to set up teaching progressions, how to set up mini games for tennis, and so I will leave those for you to read over this particular packet. I'm going to highlight the different strokes and things that you would teach in Tennis for the Skills, and so I'm going to scan through some of this content for you to be able to read through that at a later date. This first particular section goes through different strokes and the ground strokes. So what I'm going to go to is the second series in this handout to show you different strokes that you would teach. It also goes through basic rules and basic guidelines of playing tennis. So it's important to read over this as well as watch this podcast as well. Here we go. I apologize, things are a little, the scanning didn't go as well with this. One of the first skills that you teach in indoor tennis is that ready position, weight on the balls of the feet, racket grip in front of you, knees bent, ready to move side to side. And so doing some shuffle drills with the racket and cross steps, working on the shuffle going side to side or cross step for being able to run to different places along the court. So one of the key skills to teach is that ready position. The first progression to here you're teaching is the forehand. The forehand, as you show the forehand grip, racket comes back slightly. Notice that the wrist action opens up here. There's a step in opposition. It turns side shoulder to the net. Weight shifts from back foot to forefoot. Contact is right approximately at waist level. The wrist does not move, so this is more of a shoulder forearm stroke than a wrist stroke. So there's not a flick of the wrist here as in pickleball. It's a firm wrist, and then continue following through. And so that's for the basic ground stroke or basic forehand. The backhand, very similar to the pickleball backhand. Using the backhand grip, there's a step in opposition. I'm sorry, not step opposition. Step is same side for backhand grip. Notice one of the primary differences between the backhand in pickleball and the backhand in tennis is that there's not a wrist flick. There is a firm wrist here contact versus a wrist turnover, and so it's a long sweeping motion that swings out, across, and up the body towards the target. So there's the backhand cues there. Serving, another key skills to teach. Two serves, the first being the punch serve, which is more of a short serve. Doesn't have the degree of velocity. It's usually for more accuracy placement instead of speed. Notice both feet are behind the baseline. Feet must stay behind the baseline when you do this particular serve. There's a step in opposition. The ball contact position is above the head. So you reach high above the head to contact and slightly in front of the body here. The stroke contact then swings across the body. So the racket pattern goes from over the head to across the body. So those are key things to focus on as you teach this skill to students. The serve goes diagonal, must land cross court of the badminton court. The other serve, the full swing serve, is a much more forceful serve, may involve a jumping motion. Depending on the degree of advancement, the contact point is really high, maximum extension above the body here. So the ball's tossed above the head. There's a big step and rotation onto the front foot or opposite side foot. Big weight shift, so it's hit with a forceful downward motion out, across, and down in front of the body. Other key skills, the forehand volley here. I talked a little bit more about that. Notice that contact point for the forehand volley versus the forehand drive is slightly below the waist. That action comes across in front of the body. The backhand volley, other key skill to teach. Very similar to the backhand in pickleball. Notice too, though, the contact point is slightly higher than the waist here. It's usually lower than the waist for the forehand volley, slightly higher than the waist for the backhand volley. There's more of an undercut motion to this, so you're looking to put more of a backspin on the ball. The forehand lob versus the forehand volley, you notice, is contacted well below the waist, so the contact position is really low, approximately knee height or below. The idea with this one is to hit the ball high and deep into the court. Like if the opponent is at the net, you hit the ball deep. Racket finish is very high above the body. Same stepping in opposition here. Same thing goes for the backhand lob, except for a switch to step in same side versus stepping opposition. So we'll slide forward to that. Backhand lob here. Once again, cut of contact slightly higher, but there's a very high finish point because you're trying to lob the ball deep into the court with this particular stroke. So these are key things to look over in designing your teaches, looking at these progressions and teaching your students these progressions as part of your lessons. Each of this handout too also contains some common errors that students occur and corrections. Half volley is more of a short volley, so you're trying to hit it mid-court. Very similar in structure to the forehand and backhand volleys. Usually a lower point of contact on these particular shots. And then of course there's the drop shot. The drop shot's very similar to that in badminton. It's an easy tap shot over the net. Most drop shots have a backspin to them. You notice the rotation of the ball. So the racket pattern travels down under the ball. So you cut underneath the ball for the drop shot. So it's a cutting or putting a backspin on the ball as you do this. And so that is some of the resources that's contained in your resource packet for you to go over concerning indoor tennis. Progressions here can be very similar to game and game forms that you taught in pickleball. using short-sighted games, small games, drop shot games, rotational hitting patterns. And so many of the same traditional types of games that were taught in pickleball do apply to indoor tennis. One of the key variations in this teaching, though, is teaching of the serve, which is vastly different in that in pickleball.